A Second Chance at Love. Previous episodes are available in playlist, a link is given in the video description. Episode 74. Who discovered this? The veins on Lucian's arms bulged, and he vented his rage by swinging a fist at the wall. There's nothing much to be done. I have to let her go even if she will hate me for it. I'll do anything to save her life, including submitting to Jack. After an exhausting day in the ward, Madeline emerged and was surprised to see Lucian standing at the door. Have you been standing here this whole time? Lucian nodded. How is she? Madeline sighed. It's too early to tell. We've softened up her arteries a little and will continue doing so tomorrow. You should go in and keep her company. Lucian gazed at the figure inside but somehow could not move his feet. Roxanne would want you by her side, Madeline said. It was only then that Lucian's gaze softened. A moment's hesitation later, he walked in. After standing guard outside the ward through the night and seeing no change in Roxanne's condition, Lucian did not feel his anxiety alleviated in the slightest. Peregrine's words weighed heavily on his heart. He knew a change was taking place within her body that was invisible to the naked eye. At the first light of dawn, Madeline and the team of experts entered the ward to pick up where they had left off the day before. Lucian rose to leave. This time, he no longer stood guard at the door. Peregrine had not returned, but it was time for his appointment with Colby. He was anxious to see if Colby had come up with anything. Lucian sped all the way until he arrived at the prison entrance. Having been too hasty in his arrival, he had forgotten to inform his friend ahead of time. Fortunately, the guard who had greeted him the day before hurried over at once, having just started his shift. Are you here to see Colby Galloway again, Mr. Farwell? Lucian nodded expressionlessly. With a tactful nod, the guard relayed an order to have Colby brought out. The pair met once again in the visiting room. Still bounded by shackles, Colby remained under the guard's watchful eyes but regarded Lucian with less hostility this time. The pair sat across from one another in silence. As the minutes passed, Lucian's heart sank. If Colby had thought of something, he would not waste any time by telling me the second he saw me. He also wouldn't have that look on his face. The pair did not speak. Lucian nodded. I got it. It's all right. I'll think of something else. Just as he was about to leave, Colby piped up, surely you've made some progress over the past 2 days. Any other clues? Tell me. Perhaps I could think of something. Lucian paused at those words. He returned to his seat and relayed Peregrine's diagnosis once more. Her arteries have hardened, and the constriction in her circulation is causing them to contract further. Colby repeated Lucian's words with bewilderment in his eyes. Lucian inclined his head as an affirmation of his summary. After several minutes of silence, Colby looked up gravely. Who discovered this? He was not convinced of the severity of whatever poison that was. Mr. Peregrine Lomax. He is said to be the king of medicine of Morania. You might have heard of him. Despite not knowing much about the medical world, Lucian was aware of the old man's prestige from the experts' reverence for him. Why do you say that, old Mr. Lomax? Colby's eyes were filled with shock at Lucian's words. He even managed to hire old Mr. Lomax. Even more surprisingly, old Mr. Lomax couldn't handle Roxanne's condition. Otherwise, Lucian would not have come to see me today. What else did the old gentleman say? He was desperate to hear Peregrine's diagnosis. Lucian shook his head, his expression dark. Old Mr. Lomax is still perusing the medical literature for a way to cure Roxanne. Colby turned grim, his eyes thoughtful. Let me mull it over. I will think of something. I am in prison while Roxanne lies on a hospital bed with her life at stake. Even old Mr. Lomax couldn't save her. I need to do something for her no matter what it takes. Lucian's words played over and over again in his mind. Colby's brows were furrowed as he tried to decipher any information he could from those words. However, despite racking his brain, he could not think of any medicinal herbs that could match the drug's efficacy. Colby grew frustrated. Dr. Jarvis spent most of her time in the laboratory. She is susceptible to the smells of medicinal herbs, including rare specimens that have passed through her hands. She would have noticed something if she smelled something poisonous, and Jack knows this. Swiftly, he arrived at a possibility. To disguise the smell of the medicinal herbs, he must have used a good amount of fragrance. Don't push yourself if you can't come up with anything. Lucian felt touched at the sight of Colby's panic. As you said, despite old Mr. Lomax's skill, there isn't anything he could do now. Colby regained his composure, though there were traces of defeat in his gaze. If old Mr. Lomax could come up with something, Dr. Jarvis would be delighted upon waking to find out that it was he who had saved her. Lucian looked at him in puzzlement. Why do you say that? He knew the old man was a legend in the medical industry and that it would not be unusual for Roxanne to idolize him, but Colby's words seemed to indicate something else. Remembering something, Colby said, I have worked with Dr. Jarvis to develop several medications that would undoubtedly be of great interest to the industry, some of which were based on old Mr. Lomax's research. He should have had a share in the profits. Peregrine had disappeared without warning years ago and left behind much half-done research. He had even released it to the world, hoping that somebody would take over and produce something with his research. Nobody was good enough for her. Lucian's gaze dimmed when he listened to how Roxanne and Peregrine met. She would be thrilled if she woke up and learned that old Mr. Lomax had treated her. But given the current situation, keeping her safe is. If there is no other way, I can only give Jack what he wants, he said expressionlessly. Colby was taken aback. Jack gave you his conditions? What are they? There must be a catch for Lucian to be thinking twice. Lucian's grim gaze met his. You only need to know one of them. He wants me to marry another woman before Roxanne regains consciousness. Is he crazy? How could he make you do that? Lucian gave a self-deprecating laugh. It was my negligence that resulted in Roxanne's predicament. I should pay the price. It is a heavy price to pay. Colby looked at the man before him, still in shock, as his expression shifted. He would sacrifice his marriage for Roxanne's safety. He recalled the time he had first heard Roxanne's story 6 years ago. He had been disgusted with Lucian and thought him unworthy of her. Then Roxanne returned to the country 6 years later. Upon finding out about their union, Colby held on to the notion that Lucian's sin was unpardonable and realized that it was wishful thinking to envision a future with her. Many within the medical industry became interested and began conducting follow-up research. However, Roxanne was the only one who had led them to perfect the drugs. They had tried to contact Peregrine, but to no avail. Roxanne had been uneasy about being unable to share the profits with him, so she had set the price of the drugs low enough just to break even and recoup the costs to pay tribute to the man they otherwise owed. It was this incident that had given Colby his first good impression of Roxanne. In their subsequent encounters, the fondness increased until it became an obsession. At the recollection of the past and of the foolish things he had done, Colby could not help resenting himself. Now, it seems the person most worthy of Roxanne is the man before me. He is the only one who truly loves her to be willing to give anything for her. My and Jack's feelings for her, on the other hand, are only excuses we have used to hurt her. What I have done is unforgivable. After chiding himself derisively, Colby looked up at Lucian with a look of disapproval. No, you can't just let him have his way. Lucian furrowed his brows at those words. Jack is doing this to drive a wedge between you, Colby said quietly. If you do as he asked, he will get what he wants. You and Dr. Jarvis have stayed together all these years. Shouldn't that count for something? Hold on to the very end, for her sake. If she knows this, I think she will fight to her dying breath for you and the children. As if sensing his inappropriate tone, Colby took a deep breath, his features hard with resolve, as he continued, you need to have more faith in her and us doctors. We will definitely think of something. Those were the last words Lucian expected from him. A complicated mix of emotions arose in his eyes. You would see me with Roxanne? He asked, unable to contain himself. He remembered how relentless Colby had been just to draw Roxanne's attention to his existence. Even after his arrest, Colby had insisted he did nothing wrong. However, at that moment, he seemed to have become another person. Colby's eyes flashed, and he averted his gaze stiffly. Before today, I have always thought you were unworthy of Dr. Jarvis. Nobody was good enough for her. Even I myself am far from worthy. He then turned quickly to glance at Lucian. I have seen how much you are willing to sacrifice for her. Dr. Jarvis likes you, and you treat her well. That's good enough. She's better off with you than with somebody with impure motives. Did I hear him right? Lucian stood before him. Are you remorseful for what you've done? He asked in a low voice. Colby smiled bitterly. What difference does that make? I will never forgive myself for nearly causing Dr. Jarvis' death over my selfishness. He looked up at Lucian and spoke with a tone filled with hatred and disgust for himself. People are insatiable creatures. Initially, I was happy just working with her. Then, I wanted to be as close as possible to her, so I became her assistant. Not long after that, I wanted her to look at me like how she looks at you. My desire grew as the days passed. I don't even know what I was doing. Lucian studied him, trying to discern the sincerity in his words. Colby sighed. Now that I look back on the two mistakes I've made, regardless of whether it was starting the fire or sabotaging the laboratory, the slightest lapse in vigilance could have caused a major catastrophe. Aside from Dr. Jarvis, the other researchers in the research institute might have lost their lives by my hand. I deserve to be where I am for my crimes. Having confessed his feelings to Roxanne on the day of his arrest, he finally understood that when he was escorted into the police car. However, it was too late for contrition. Because of that, Colby had never considered submitting an appeal to overturn his conviction. Instead, he wished to serve his sentence to alleviate the guilt within him. "What do you plan to do after you get out?" Lucian asked unexpectedly. Colby was stunned. He seemed to have never considered the matter. He lowered his gaze for several seconds before answering, "Maybe I'll become a traveling doctor, as my chances of employment at a research institute or hospital are uncertain. As long as people believe in me, I will provide free medical treatment to compensate for what I've done." After observing him for a while, Lucian gathered enough to ascertain every word of his rang true. "What about Roxanne?" he asked. "You still owe her an apology." Colby's eyes flashed with guilt. "I will apologize to her. She is still the best doctor I've ever known." Lucian nodded meaningfully at that. Colby frowned, puzzled. "You don't believe me?" "I do, which is why I want to make you an offer on Roxanne's behalf to have you come back to the research institute after you get out." Colby's eyes widened with disbelief. What did you say?" "After all the awful things I've done, Lucian still wants me to work alongside Roxanne. Did I hear him right? What could have possessed him to do so?" "I would like you to return to work at the research institute after your sentence ends," Lucian repeated calmly. "As you said, you are the longest-serving assistant of Roxanne's. Though you have done wrong, you have made amends in time, showing me you have truly repented. You're welcome to work alongside Roxanne again after your release." Colby still had not regained his composure. Suddenly, Lucian changed the subject as his expression grew stern. "However, you will be under my supervision. I guarantee you will be thousands of times worse off if you get any ideas." Not slept in 2 days. Colby took a long time to gather himself before nodding slowly, still stupefied with disbelief. Lucian retracted his gaze. "I want to thank you for your words earlier. I won't give in, and Roxanne will get better." Colby felt a sudden sense of relief at those words. "She will. I hope you'll let me know when you get married so I can wish you well." Lucian inclined his head. The men exchanged a final glance in silence. Colby watched Lucian leave before allowing himself to be escorted back to his cell. With his mind buzzing with Colby's words as he emerged from the facility, Lucian gradually regained his calm. "I have done everything I can. From here, it's only waiting and hoping. Either the doctors will think of something before the deadline, or I will have to give in to Jack. Before then, the only thing I can do is with Roxanne." Spurred by that thought, he stepped on the gas and sped toward the hospital. It was dusk when he arrived. Lucian had Caden pick up dinner for the medical specialists at the hospital. They dined on the large table in the conference room. Still uneasy, Madeline remained by Roxanne's bed. She stood up upon his arrival. "How did it go? Did you discover anything?" Lucian shook his head, but his expression did not look as pale as when he had left. There was even a glimmer of optimism in his eyes. "Nothing yet, but I believe no harm will come to Roxanne." After speaking, he observed Madeline's expression. Being fraught with worry for 2 days straight did Madeline's pallor no good. Her eyes and brow were lined with fatigue. "Go get some rest," Lucian said. "I had Caden book some rooms in the hotel next door. Everybody needs a good night's rest." Madeline glanced at Roxanne, her brows furrowing. I'm worried about her. Besides, I rested the night before. You, on the other hand, need some. Roxanne will be sad if she wakes up and sees you like this. Lucian nodded. I'll stay with her tonight and get some rest here. You've been running around the entire day and will continue to do so tomorrow. We cannot handle the consequences of any mishap from fatigue. At that, Madeline finally nodded. If anything unusual happens to her, call me. I'll keep my phone on, she reminded him before leaving. Lucian nodded. Only then did Madeline feel assured enough to depart with the group, who were still discussing Roxanne's condition on their way to the hotel. I had heard of Dr. Jarvis when she was abroad, but by her Australasian name. I thought she was around our age. Imagine my shock when I found out she was Dr. Lambert's disciple, who was in her 20s. Searched the library following Madeline's departure, pin-drop silence filled the air inside the ward. Lucian dragged a chair over and sat beside the bed. He grasped Roxanne's hand with a tender look spread across his face. Don't worry, Roxanne. Everyone is thinking of ways to save you. Even old Mr. Lomax is here. He's currently browsing through references with Jonathan to figure out how to treat you. I believe he will definitely come up with a solution. I think you would want to meet him too, Lucian said patiently despite knowing she couldn't hear him. I'm also aware of Archie and Benny's parentage now. I'm sorry for not discovering they are my children earlier. I'm also grateful I didn't treat them with prejudice because I mistook them as another man's offspring. You've raised them well. On the other hand, I failed to take good care of our daughter. Because of me, our 3 children grew up in an incomplete family. Now that I know the truth, I only wish to do my best to compensate you all, but that can only be done provided that you wake up. Exceptional traditional medicine practitioners are becoming increasingly rare. What a shame that something like this happened to this one. Mr. Farwell has not slept in 2 days for Dr. Jarvis. I pity the young couple. We can't let anything happen to her. Madeline gradually regained some faith as she listened to the group's chatter. With so many talented doctors working together, in addition to old Mr. Lomax's assistants, nothing will happen to Roxanne. At the same time, she felt thankful. It's fortunate that Roxanne is with Lucian. If not for the Farwell family's wealth, we wouldn't have been able to hire this many skilled doctors. You will tough this out for the kids, won't you? Gently rubbing his fingers against her hand, he unwittingly tightened his grip and fell silent for a few seconds before adding, if the doctors still can't think of a solution after 3 days, I will have no choice but to agree to Jack's request. By then, he will undoubtedly force me to marry another woman. I hope that after you regain consciousness. He paused for a few moments before letting out a sigh of resignation. When you regain consciousness and wish to hate me, you can do so. It was my fault for failing to safeguard you, so this is a burden I deserve to bear. Roxanne did not respond even after he muttered the long speech. In the end, Lucian's heart ached so terribly that he couldn't speak further. He could only sit on the side of the bed and gazed at her in silence. Another sleepless night ensued. The next morning, Lucian got up and left the ward when the doctors came to do their rounds. Standing in the corridor and watching the doctors doing their jobs, Lucian couldn't stop himself from taking out his phone and contacting Jonathan. He lost contact with Peregrine after the latter's last visit to the hospital. He wondered if Peregrine had thought of any treatment plans. It took a while before Jonathan answered. "What's the matter, Lucian? Did Roxanne's condition destabilize again?" Jonathan whispered. Obviously, he was hiding in a corner, speaking with an undertone. Lucian knitted his brows. "Are you still browsing through references?" Jonathan nodded. "We stayed up the whole night yesterday and almost searched all the medical-related books in the library, but..." At the thought of the outcome, Jonathan hesitated to speak. "We've gone through so many references, yet old Mr. Lomax is still clueless about how to cure Roxanne's condition." He couldn't bring himself to inform Lucian of thought-depressive news. Lucian's heart sunk as he managed to guess the lack of progress. Still, he didn't probe further and merely said, "Help me express my gratitude and take good care of old Mr. Lomax. I'll personally thank him ongoing often tomorrow. Old Mr. Lomax is our body of such advanced ogle, yet he's willing to story up all ya night to study medical books for Roxanne's sake. This gesture alone is sufficiently moving." Jonathan heaved a soundless sigh before comforting Lucian, "There's another day left. We will find a way. Don't worry, Lucian." Lucian grunted indifferently in response and hung up the cell the next second, not giving Jonathan the opportunity to soy on other word. Storing out his dimming phone screen and shifting his glows to Peregrine, who was flipping through the medical references, Jonathan felt heavy-hearted. Although he had consoled Lucian in that manner earlier, he couldn't deny the cold, hard truth lying before them. The choices of saving Roxanne with the combined effort of only a few of them were very slim. At the thought of the outcome, Jonathan hesitated to speak. "We've gone through so many references, yet old Mr. Lomax is still clueless about how to cure Roxanne's condition." He couldn't bring himself to inform Lucian of that depressive news. Lucian's heart sank as he managed to guess the lack of progress. Still, he didn't probe further and merely said, "Help me express my gratitude and take good care of old Mr. Lomax. I'll personally thank him again after tomorrow. Old Mr. Lomax is already of such advanced age, yet he's willing to stay up all night to study medical books for Roxanne's sake. This gesture alone is sufficiently moving." Jonathan heaved a soundless sigh before comforting Lucian, "There's another day left. We will find a way. Don't worry, Lucian." Lucian grunted indifferently in response and hung up the call the next second, not giving Jonathan the opportunity to say another word. Staring at his dimming phone screen and shifting his gaze to Peregrine, who was flipping through the medical references, Jonathan felt heavy-hearted. Although he had consoled Lucian in that manner earlier, he couldn't deny the cold, hard truth lying before them. The chances of saving Roxanne with the combined effort of only a few of them were very slim. Business trip. The doctors spent a long time working inside the ward. Their faces were pale when they exited the room. None of them dared to meet Lucian's eyes when they reached the doorway. "How is it?" Lucian asked after Madeline came to a halt beside him. Madeline seemed absorbed in her thoughts. She was slightly dazed for a few seconds before regaining her senses upon hearing his voice. A grimace spread across her countenance. Roxanne. Although the doctors had been trying various methods to soften her blood vessels, the effects were negligible. Roxanne was not looking well at that moment. Madeline had no choice but to repeatedly cheer herself and Roxanne up inwardly, convincing herself to believe Roxanne would survive. Nevertheless, she couldn't tell those things to Lucian. Judging by his ashen face, Madeline reckoned Lucian had stayed up all night again, even though he mentioned he would take a nap. She hesitated to speak. Lucian gazed at her intently and uttered firmly, "That's all right. I won't let anything bad happen to her." With that, he turned to look at Roxanne, who was lying inside the ward. Madeline fathomed his intention after taking in his facial expression. She opened her mouth but couldn't bring herself to persuade him otherwise. Between Roxanne's survival and her love life, Madeline would undoubtedly choose the former. Madeline and Lucian entered the ward one after the other. Looking at Roxanne, whose eyes were tightly shut, they felt utterly depressed. Suddenly, Roxanne's phone rang. Madeline glanced at the device and saw Benny's name on the caller ID. Her heart ached when she saw the incoming call, and tears brimmed in her eyes uncontrollably. She couldn't bring herself to reach out and answer the call. Just when she thought of letting the call disconnect on its own, someone stretched out their hand to pick up the phone. That person was Lucian. A look of confusion flashed across Madeline's face when she saw him answering the call. She wondered how he planned to explain the current circumstances to the children. "Mommy!" The kids' gleeful voices sounded from the other end of the call. They had been dialing Roxanne's number consecutively for 2 to 3 days, but she didn't answer their calls. They were thrilled because she finally picked up their call that day. Lucian gulped when he heard the kids' delightful tone. Even his eyes became slightly reddened. Still, he lowered his head and recomposed himself before saying calmly, "It's me. Your mommy is still occupied with work." Hearing his voice, the kids exchanged glances in puzzlement. "Daddy? Isn't mommy on a business trip? Is she back? Otherwise, why would Daddy be using mommy's phone?" Lucian silently cleared his throat and said, "She's not back yet. I traveled here to meet with your mommy. She encountered some problems at work and required my assistance." The children were dissatisfied upon hearing that. "We want to meet with mommy too. You can't come here. The living environment here is very harsh. Your mommy and I fear you won't get used to the conditions here. If you were to get sick, your mommy wouldn't have time to care for you all." Naturally, the kids didn't want to add to Roxanne's trouble, so they could only acquiesce to Lucian's decision. "All right. Can you pass the phone to mommy, then?" Because of the lingering quietness in the ward, the children's voices, originating from the phone speaker, clearly reverberated beside Madeline's ears. Hearing their words and glancing at Roxanne, who was lying on the bed, Madeline couldn't stop her tears from streaming down her cheeks. She covered her mouth and hastily exited the room to prevent the kids from hearing her sobs. "Do not have to apologize." Lucian fell silent for a few moments before saying to them, "Your mommy is busy, but she should be back by tomorrow. We'll call you when we arrive at the airport." The kids were worried, as Roxanne had been out of reach for the past few days. However, after Lucian made the promise that they would be returning the next day, the kids relaxed and said, "Okay. Daddy, you must take good care of mommy." Lucian grunted in acknowledgement. "Give your watch to Ms. Catalina. I need to have a word with her." He heard a rustling sound before Catalina's voice rang out. "Mr. Lucian. How are the children?" Did anything unusual happen? Lucian asked. Catalina glanced at the children on the couch, taking in their wide, expectant eyes. She recalled the past 2 days' events and replied, "No. Mr. Archie, Mr. Benny, and Ms. Estella were all very well behaved." Then, remembering something, she added, "I believe Mr. Archie and Mr. Benny had a phone conversation with their friend overseas, but I'm not sure what they discussed." Lucian pondered over her words for a few moments and confirmed the kids didn't suspect anything. "All right. Please do your best to look after them. Thank you for your dedication." "Of course. You and Mrs. Farwell take care, too." After the call ended, Lucian gazed at Roxanne and reached out to caress her pale cheek. "Did you hear that, Roxanne? The kids are waiting for you to go home. You'll wake up soon, right?" Roxanne remained motionless, her breathing so light and shallow that it was almost imperceptible. Lucian's fists balled up as he seemed to be struggling to make up his mind. Madeline stepped into the ward, her eyes swollen and red from the tears she had shed. Her voice was still unsteady as she asked, "Do the kids know?" Lucian shook his head. "No. I've asked Catalina, and they have yet to suspect anything as long as Roxanne contacts them before tomorrow night." "Tomorrow night?" Madeline's heart clenched as she started dreading tomorrow. It was already the second day, so if they still couldn't figure out anything by tomorrow morning, they would have no choice but to agree to Jack's condition. Madeline dreaded the thought of Roxanne's response when the latter eventually regained consciousness, as well as the children's reaction. Before returning to the country, Archie and Benny held a strong prejudice against Lucian. It took Lucian a long time to change their minds about him. If the children discovered he married another woman when Roxanne was severely ill, they would most probably hate him for the rest of his life. Madeline felt a heavy burden of guilt settle in her heart as the thought crossed her mind. "I'm sorry," she muttered, her gaze fixed firmly on the ground. Lucian's brows furrowed slightly, as he had no idea why she would suddenly apologize to him. Feeling heavy-hearted, Madeline explained, "Because of what happened 6 years ago, I was biased against you and assumed you were a bastard. I even told Roxanne to stay away from you. I had no idea you'd do this for her." Lucian's gaze turned dark. "You don't have to apologize to me. It was my fault 6 years ago. I will make it up to her now. 6 years ago, I wronged Roxanne. Little did I know that I would be making the same mistake again 6 years later. If I had been more aware of my emotions and acted on them when I was younger, or if I had taken it upon myself to set her free when we bumped into each other again after so many years, she would not have had to go through so much." Giving up on himself, they both waited hopefully until the afternoon. Time ticked away, and it was soon 3 in the afternoon. Alas, no one could figure out a way to save Roxanne. Madeline felt a wave of anxiety wash over her, and she felt completely lost. Her gaze kept shifting to Lucian. She wanted to ask him what they should do. Lucian remained unfazed. His face was as cold as ice. Seeing his reaction, Madeline blurted out, "Mr. Farwell, are we still going to wait? Should we call old Mr. Lomax?" Lucian met her gaze and said firmly, "I need to leave. Take care of Roxanne. I'm not sure when I'll be back." Madeline asked anxiously, "Where are you going at this hour?" Lucian's gaze landed on Roxanne, who was lying in bed silently. A flash of determination appeared in his eyes and disappeared. "I'm going to Jack," Madeline gaped incredulously. "What? Are you seriously going to?" She trailed off and clenched her jaw. Despite her strong desire to reach out and grab his sleeve to prevent him from leaving, she didn't dare do so, as he seemed really intimidating. She merely gave him a look of disapproval. "There is still time. Let's wait instead of giving in to Jack now." Lucian paid no heed to her and turned to leave. "I can't wait anymore. It's too risky, and I can't breathe thought of putting Roxanne's life in danger." Madeline parted her lips, but she couldn't say anything to stop him from leaving. After all, she knew she would do the same if she were in his shoes. They couldn't afford to risk Roxanne's life. Lucian strode out of the ward, his face expressionless. He walked through the corridor, passing by a group of specialists. Everyone couldn't help but wonder what was going on after seeing him. "Is Mr. Farwell going to give up on Dr. Jarvis? Dr. Jarvis' condition is deteriorating, but he doesn't seem anxious at all." "I don't think so. We saw how distressed he has been in the past few days. He even invited old Mr. Lomax here. Why would he give up suddenly?" As the elevator doors slid shut, everyone else raised their voices, eager to discuss the possibilities. Hearing the commotion, Madeline marched out of the ward and gave them a pointed look. "Everyone, if you're free, then I suggest getting back to work trying to figure out how to treat Roxanne instead of wasting time gossiping here." No one knew better than her that Lucian had never thought about giving up on Roxanne. He was actually giving up on himself. The specialists were determined to treat Roxanne but couldn't help gossiping when they noticed Lucian leaving. It was normal for Madeline to lash out at them, and they understood her feelings well. They got back to work instantly. Business genius. The phone rang for almost 1 minute before Jack answered the call. "Who is this?" Jack's voice was dripping with arrogance and disdain. Lucian responded calmly, "It's me, Lucian." "Oh, it's you," Jack drawled in exaggeration as though he had just realized who it was. "Mr. Farwell, hello. I thought it was someone else who was rude enough to interrupt me while I was busy working." He was saying that Lucian was rude enough to interrupt him at work. Lucian pretended to be oblivious to Jack's mockery and replied calmly, "It looks like I picked the wrong time to call. Mr. Damaris, if you're occupied, then you can call me back when you're free." He fell silent after saying that but didn't end the call. On the other end of the phone, Jack grew flustered when he heard Lucian indicating that he wanted to end the conversation. "Wait a minute." Lucian arched a brow, for Jack's reaction was within his anticipation. "No matter how busy my schedule may be, I need to make time for you since you took the initiative to call me, Mr. Farwell," Jack sneered. Madeline glanced at the elevator, which had finally reached the parking lot level. She then turned to look at her best friend, who was oblivious to everything. The agony that flickered across her face revealed the inner turmoil she was experiencing. In the parking lot, Lucian sat in his car for a long time without revving up the engine. He had assumed he could accept the reality as long as Roxanne could survive. Even though he was on the verge of losing her, Lucian still could not rid himself of his own selfish desires. Is accepting Jack's conditions the only way out? Lucian waited in the car for almost half an hour, but there was no update. Finally, he pulled out his phone to call Jack. "How can I help you? If my memory serves me correctly, it isn't time yet as we agreed upon 3 days." Lucian was unperturbed. "As long as I'm willing to give in, any day works. I believe you never wanted anything to happen to Roxanne, do you?" Most of Jack's requests involved Roxanne, so if anything were to happen to her, even if Jack got the research institute for himself, he would never be able to realize its maximum potential. Hearing that, Jack grew increasingly smug. "You're right, Mr. Farwell. That was what I thought, too." Lucian ignored his arrogance and said, "Since we have reached an agreement, are you free tonight? Let's talk in person. Remember to bring the antidote along, Mr. Damaris." Jack chuckled. "Of course. I would be delighted to meet with you, Mr. Farwell, at any time that is convenient for you." They agreed on the time and location before hanging up. Jack was brimming with conceit as he sat in his chair in the office. "Business genius, huh? He is no match for me." Having overheard their exchange, Kevin felt a chill go down his spine. "I am astounded that Mr. Damaris had such a callous disregard for human life that he would resort to using a person's life to threaten Mr. Farwell. It is even more distressing that Mr. Farwell proved to be so pliable as to give in to the threat. I heard Lucian had brought in specialists from all around the world in an attempt to treat Roxanne, but despite his best efforts, he still required my assistance," Jack said with disdain. "Didn't I tell him that I'm the only one who has the power to save her since it was me who poisoned her in the first place?" He then glared at Kevin. "What are you doing? Hurry, reserve a table at the restaurant." Kevin snapped out of his reverie and nodded readily. "Got it. Mr. Damaris, I'll go handle it right away." He spun on his heels and fled the office. Kevin closed the door firmly behind him, shutting out the chill of the room and the oppressive atmosphere he had just been subjected to. Expert at 6 in the evening, they met at the restaurant. Lucian did not have the patience to wait, so he immediately headed there after ending the call. When Jack arrived, the table in front of him was bare except for a single glass of water. It was obvious that Lucian had used the same reason to stop the server from serving them the dishes. Jack was inwardly displeased, and his smile was cold. "I'm pleasantly surprised that you were willing to wait for me, Mr. Farwell." Jack strode across the room and took his seat 2 chairs away from Lucian. "You should have let me know if you dislike the food here." Lucian glanced at Jack as though he had just realized the latter was around. "It's not that. I don't think it's necessary to eat here, that's all." With that, he went straight to the topic. "I've prepared the property transfer agreement for the 10 companies. Once you have signed the agreement, you will take possession of the companies. As for the Research Institute, I have signed the indemnity contract to officially terminate our collaboration. This contract is also included inside." Taking a deep breath, he allowed himself a moment to relax and gather his composure before leaving to carry out Jack's orders. After Jack sent Hector away, chaos ensued within Damaris Group. In an effort to regain control, Jack resorted to the use of extreme and forceful methods to restore order within the organization. Jack took decisive action against those who went against him. Others might have been unhappy with his decisions, but they kept their objections to themselves, not wanting to risk incurring his wrath. Because of that, Jack started doing as he wished in Damaris group. It was only 5 in the afternoon. He was supposed to attend a meeting in the evening, but he decided to leave the company. He took the antidote with him and strolled out leisurely. He retrieved a file and pushed it to Jack coolly. Jack was surprised to see the file, but it wasn't long before his expression changed to one of smug satisfaction. Turns out it's pretty satisfying to see Lucian give in to me. To have the opportunity to get the better of Lucian and make him plead for my help is something that doesn't come around often. I must make the most of it. He flashed a smirk and pushed the file aside without seeing what was inside. If you had known it would come to this, why would you reject me 2 days ago? Jack asked. Didn't you say you'd exhaust your wealth and resources to save Ms. Jarvis? How is she doing now? Something glinted across Lucian's eyes when Roxanne was mentioned, but he quickly calmed down. No matter what, I believe she'll regain consciousness tomorrow as long as you give me the antidote as promised, Mr. Damaris. A smile nudged Jack's lips as he said slowly, Don't worry. There's no need to rush. I believe you still haven't fulfilled all of my conditions. Once everything is done, I'll deliver the antidote to you. Lucian's gaze swept over him. The expression on Jack's face was one of haughty confidence and conceit. He looks certain that I have no choice but to ask for his help. Lucian had been mentally preparing himself to accept his condition before he arrived at this location. However, upon his arrival, he found himself unable to say so. I heard that you had hired many experienced doctors to diagnose Ms. Jarvis. It looks like she's still unconscious now. It seems that those foolish doctors have yet to determine how my drug functions. Hey? It's no surprise that the medical industry is in such a state. Anyone can call themselves an expert as long as they have worked in the field for a long period of time. Realizing he had gone off topic, Jack snorted. Don't worry. Even if they managed to find the root of the problem, that doesn't mean they can find a solution. I had to peruse the ancient medicine books of the Damaris family extensively before I could develop this drug. Comprehension dawned on Lucian. No wonder old Mr. Lomax couldn't locate the antidote despite his extensive study of medical books, as it was revealed that the solution lies solely within the ancient medicine books of the Damaris family. High and mighty after Jack explained about the drug he developed, he asked cheerily, So, Mr. Farwell? Have you considered my third condition? Despite his initial shock, Lucian regained his composure and met Jack's gaze calmly. You have my word. Jack was still unsatisfied. Just that? What about proof? Without proof, how can I be sure that you are not lying to me? I trust your character, but I went through a lot of effort to create the antidote. I don't want to get tricked. Lucian furrowed his brows. What kind of proof do you need? Jack arched a brow and said readily, A marriage certificate, of course. It's too late now. The city hall should be closed. If you announce to the public that you're marrying someone else, I'll take that, too. With that, he shot Lucian a provoking look. Jack knew precisely which condition was most unacceptable to Lucian, so he was eager to observe Lucian's distress after he brought up the condition again. Will certainly relish the sight of the high and mighty CEO of Farwell Group suffering before me. All right. Lucian nodded calmly. Jack frowned as surprise and displeasure flitted across his gaze. What did you just say? He did not expect Lucian's reaction and was thoroughly disappointed. This is the moment I've been eagerly anticipating. How could Lucian be this calm? Why isn't he hesitating or experiencing any reservations about having to leave Roxanne? How could he say yes so easily? A mocking grin played on Lucian's lips. I've already considered the 3 conditions carefully and made up my mind before asking to meet you. However, it was a careless mistake on my part, as I didn't get the proof ready for you. I'll leave to take care of it right away. He then got up to leave. It is not surprising that this information was not documented in other sources. He didn't show any signs of begging for mercy and portrayed an air of superiority as if he had complete command of the situation. Jack's face contorted in fury as he watched Lucian leave. A long while later, he rose to his feet and, in a fit of rage, sent all the items on the table crashing to the floor with a powerful sweep of his arm. The glass shattered into hundreds of tiny shards as it hit the ground with an almighty crash. Outside, the server heard the commotion. Concerned that some sort of accident might have occurred, he rushed in to investigate. However, he was met with an enraged Jack. Who allowed you to come in? Get out! The server trembled in fear and nodded profusely before leaving Jack alone. Another ruckus sounded in the room. Jack would flip the table over if he could. Lucian had to ask for my help. Who does he think he is? How could he act all arrogant? After losing the 10 subsidiaries, Farwell Group is likely to suffer a steep decline that would soon bring him down to the same level as the Damaris family. Despite this, he had the nerve to come to me with such confidence. Jack returned to his seat, his face flushed with anger. His fury only subsided when he remembered that Lucian was about to marry someone else soon. So what if Lucian acts all high and mighty? He'll have to listen to me in the end. After he marries someone else, there will be no going back. I'll figure out a way to win Roxanne's heart and trample Lucian beneath my feet. Marry him as soon as possible. At 7 that evening, Lucian's car rolled to a stop before the Farwell main residence. The house was brightly lit. Lucian sat in the car for a few minutes before eventually stepping out, his footsteps echoing loudly off the pavement. He walked from the gate to the door of the main building. On the way, he didn't forget to recompose himself. Mr. Lucian. The butler came out to greet him. Mr. and Mrs. Farwell are having dinner inside. Lucian nodded and headed into the mansion with him. Inside, he saw Sonia and Elias sitting at the dining table. Sonia and Elias appeared to be discussing something, with Sonia seemingly unhappy and Elias seemingly powerless to do anything. Upon spotting Lucian, Elias asked, "What brings you here? Have you had anything to eat? If not, want to join us?" Lucian nodded and settled in the seat across from Sonia. Sonia parted her lips and said, "You came at the right time. Your dad and I were talking about Electra. You remember her, right? She's from the Lane family and grew up with you." Lucian belatedly remembered such a person existed after hearing his mother's words. They had indeed grown up together, but the Lane family had gone overseas a few years ago. "Electra came back a few days ago and was telling us she wanted to meet you but didn't know when you would be free," Sonia continued. "I think she's a great match for you and would be a lot better than Roxanne. She's kind and gentle, so you won't have to worry about her causing trouble like Aubrey." She had been trying to explain her view to Elias, but he held fast to his own thought and thought her to be wrong. That was why the atmosphere seemed tense earlier. Elias thought she shouldn't be saying that and interjected, "Stop interfering in Lucian's relationship. It has been years since they last met, so Electra might not think that way." Sonia huffed in displeasure. Lucian is a capable man. Even if Electra doesn't have feelings for him now, if they spend more time together, her feelings for him may develop and grow over time. How can you be sure she doesn't love him? They started arguing again and completely forgot about Lucian. "You can talk to her," Lucian suddenly said. Silence fell after he said those words. Both Sonia and Elias gazed at him in disbelief. "What did you just say?" Elias was the first to regain his composure. He frowned as he put his fork down. Lucian reiterated, "Since you both think she's nice, you can approach her. I have no objections if she's interested in becoming my wife." The reason he came to Sonia was that Aubrey was the only woman he had been in contact with over the years. Despite agreeing with Jack's condition to marry another woman, he couldn't find any suitable candidate. He had to seek his mother's help. She had never liked Roxanne and would definitely look around for other suitable women. Be it Electra or another woman, he didn't mind, for they weren't Roxanne. All he needed was a woman who would marry him as soon as possible. Sonia and Elias shared a look before giving Lucian a pointed one. They refused to believe that he would suddenly change his mind. "So, you want to marry Electra now? But what about Roxanne? I thought you were adamant about marrying her a while ago. And what about Essie?" Elias asked sternly. "Your own decision." Lucian's gaze darkened slightly when Elias mentioned Roxanne. However, he concealed it and recomposed himself before his parents noticed it. "I'll ask Essie first. But if she wants to be with her mother, I won't stop her." Lucian only mentioned his arrangement for Estella and said nothing about Roxanne. Sonia felt even more incredulous when she heard that Lucian had even thought about whether he was going to keep Estella or let her go. "What's with you today, Lucian? Are you feeling sick? Do you have a fever?" Sonia asked. "Although I've never liked Roxanne, I know Lucian is obsessed with her. In fact, no one knows that better than me. I was prepared for a long battle. Why is he giving up so easily? Could this be a trick or something?" Lucian looked at her with a plain expression and asked in a deep voice, "Haven't you been wishing to see me marry another woman? Why are you reacting this way now that I'm giving in?" Sonia was rendered speechless. Nonetheless, she still felt something was amiss, so she shot Elias a glance. Elias looked at Lucian concernedly and asked, "Did something happen? Did you have a fight with Roxanne?" That was what Elias had in mind because he couldn't think of another reason for his son's behavior. Lucian didn't comment on that. Instead, he urged Sonia, "I don't have her contact, so please help me contact her and ask her to come over. Or maybe I can go over to look for her." Sonia's eyes were filled with confusion. "I'm only saying this tonight. After tonight, I might change my mind." Lucian turned to meet Sonia's gaze. Sonia was still hesitating. "It's true. I've always wanted him to marry someone else. However, something is definitely wrong with Lucian tonight." "What happened, Lucian? Tell us. Even if I can't help you, maybe your dad can?" Sonia asked patiently because she wanted to get to the bottom of it. Lucian's patience was running thin. He instantly put down his fork and said, "Since you're not going to help, I'll do it myself." Sonia grew anxious when she saw him walking toward the door. She quickly agreed to it and said, "All right. I'll call Electra and ask her to come over." With that, she whipped out her phone to ring Electra. The call got through after just a few rings. With a scowl on her face, Sonia asked, "Are you free now, Electra? You've been wanting to see Lucian ever since you came back, right? He's here with me now. Would you like to come over?" That was the first time Sonia had asked to meet someone during dinner time. Fortunately for Sonia, Electra didn't mind one bit. In fact, Electra was elated when she heard she could see Lucian. Needless to say, she agreed to go over. Upon hanging up the phone, Sonia looked at Lucian helplessly and said, "Electra said she's coming over. Sit down and have some food." After saying that, she sighed worriedly. What exactly happened? Why did Lucian change so suddenly? Lucian kept mum and sat in the same spot as before. Sonia glanced at Lucian before shooting Elias a look. She knew Lucian wouldn't listen to whatever she had to say, so she hoped that Elias could get some answers out of Lucian. To her dismay, Elias merely stared at Lucian with a grim expression and rose to his feet. "It's your decision, so I'm not going to intervene, but you have to be responsible for your own decision." With that, he turned around and went upstairs. Marriage certificate. Lucian and Sonia sat in the living room and waited for Electra. Neither of them uttered a word to the other. After some time, they heard noises coming from the door. Sonia glanced at Lucian before standing up to greet the guest. "Mrs. Farwell," the guest greeted. An elegant woman was seen walking in through the main entrance. Not only did the woman have a nice smile, but she also had a gentle voice. In fact, she seemed like a cultured and educated girl. In a dark green dress, Electra was holding a white purse in one hand and Sonia's arm affectionately in the other. Ever since she returned to the country, she had met up with Sonia a few times, so they were close. Obviously, Sonia liked Electra and thought Electra would make a perfect daughter-in-law. "I'm so sorry for asking to see you at such an odd time. Have you had your dinner?" Sonia asked with a smile. Electra returned with a smile of her own and replied, "It's all right. I'm on a diet. I don't eat at night." The two of them entered the living room. When Lucian heard them approaching, he rose to his feet and greeted the guest gentlemanly. "It's been a while, Lucian. You look so mature now." Admiration flashed across Electra's eyes when she saw Lucian. They had parted when they were both still teenagers. Over the years, Electra had seen Lucian on the television frequently, and she knew he had changed a lot. However, only when she saw him in person did she realize how much he had changed. Lucian politely reached out to shake her hand. "Indeed, it's been a while. You look prettier now." Electra smiled sheepishly in response. Sonia had forgotten all about her bafflement from earlier on when she saw the two of them interacting harmoniously. With a smile, she said, "You guys talk, okay? I'll make some coffee." She turned around and left to give them some privacy. Electra sat down on the couch next to Lucian and sized him up. She had been spending time with Sonia over the past couple of days, so she had heard quite a bit about what was going on between Lucian and Roxanne. Now that I see him, it's really hard to imagine him doing those things for a woman. Besides, why is he seeing me? Is he not worried about Ms. Jarvis misunderstanding the situation? At that moment, Electra's gaze was filled with puzzlement. Do you have a boyfriend or someone you're into? Lucian asked straightforwardly. Electra was dumbfounded when she heard the question, and she cast him a confused glance. Isn't that a private question? Why is Lucian asking me that the minute he sees me? Upon seeing the earnest expression on Lucian's face, Electra instinctively became serious as well. And no. What's up? What do you think about me? If you don't mind, we can get our marriage certificates right away. Electra got even more confused. What's happening? We've only met each other, and he's already asking me to marry him. If I remember correctly, Sonia told me Lucian is in love with someone. If that's the case, why is he doing this? Besides, where are we supposed to go to get our marriage certificates at night? Lucian, have you been drinking? Do you know what you're talking about? She asked. With a straight face, Lucian answered, I haven't been drinking. Electra could not wrap her head around it when she heard his answer. In a deep voice, Lucian said, That's the reason I asked to see you. You can give it some thought whether you want to marry me or not. Does she know? Electra didn't know how to respond, as Lucian seemed adamant about getting married. At that moment, Sonia was leaving the kitchen after preparing the coffee. When she heard what Lucian said, she couldn't help but be astounded. Thought Lucian said those words in a fit of rage. That's why I thought he would change his mind the moment he saw Electra. However, he's actually doing it. Furthermore, he's being so straightforward. Lucian, are you facing some difficulties? Otherwise, why would you suddenly ask me to marry you? Electra regained her senses, and a guess slowly surfaced in her mind. Something must have happened, and Lucian is forced to do this. What could it be? Sonia halted in her tracks when she heard Electra's question. She also threw Lucian a confused glance. I've been asking him that question, and I couldn't get an answer out of him. Now, even Electra thinks something has happened. That has to be the case, then. Will he tell Electra the truth? Sonia waited by the entrance of the kitchen. She had thought she could eavesdrop on their conversation. To her surprise, Lucian suddenly turned toward her and met her gaze. Sonia froze momentarily before coming back to her senses and serving them the drinks nonchalantly. I made coffee for you guys. Have some while you guys talk. Then she sat down next to them. Please give us some privacy. I need to speak privately with Ms. Lane, Lucian uttered in a deep voice. As soon as those words fell, Sonia froze and her expression stiffened. What do you want to talk to her about? Why must you hide it from me? Naturally, Sonia was displeased. However, Lucian wasn't keen on explaining himself. For a moment, the atmosphere in the room became tense. Feeling the tension, Electra quickly said, Mrs. Farwell, I suddenly feel like eating the finger food you make. Would you mind making some for me? Only then did Sonia give in and say, Carry on, then. I'll make some finger food for you." After saying that, Sonia went back to the kitchen reluctantly. Lucian and Elektra continued talking after Sonia left. While Sonia was making finger food in the kitchen, she tried her best to listen in on their conversation, but to no avail. Half an hour later, Sonia couldn't take it anymore. She stopped what she was doing and wanted to check on them. Unexpectedly, she saw them standing up and seemingly leaving the moment she left the kitchen. "What's the matter?" Sonia looked at them in confusion. "Mrs. Farwell, I'm sorry, but I'm in a rush. I won't be able to eat those finger food today. Please save some for me, and I'll come again another day." Elektra smiled. "In a rush?" Sonia threw Lucian a suspicious look. Found someone so quickly, the two of them got into the car right away. When they were on their way to the city hall, Elektra was still in utter disbelief. "Did I really just say yes to him? I'm getting married to my childhood sweetheart whom I haven't seen in years. This is surreal." Lucian noticed she was lost in thoughts, so he asked, "What's on your mind?" Elektra snapped out of her reverie and smiled nonchalantly. "Nothing. This feels like a dream. Besides, I didn't know the Farwell family is so influential that even the working hours for the city hall can be altered. I just need someone to stamp a seal. Besides, I'm merely asking one of them to help, so it's not a big deal." Elektra smiled and went silent. Half an hour later, they arrived in front of the city hall on the dot, and both of them went in to receive their marriage certificates. After exiting the city hall, Lucian drove slowly toward the Damaris residence. Instead of reacting to the direction they were driving in, Elektra was merely looking at her marriage certificate curiously. Upon meeting her gaze, Lucian said flatly, "I'm bringing her to the city hall to collect our marriage certificates. I've already contacted the city hall, and they told me they would wait half an hour for us." He turned to look at Elektra, signaling for her to pick up the pace. No one knew what they had talked about, but Elektra had a natural expression on her face. In fact, she even picked up her purse cooperatively and rushed toward Lucian. Just like that, they walked toward the door, one after another. Sonia was undeniably happy to see his son fulfilling her wishes by marrying another woman. However, she could not help but find it weird. "Why are you in such a rush? Does Essie know about this?" Sonia chased after Lucian. Without turning back, Lucian answered, "I'll tell her after I collect the marriage certificate." "We're here," Lucian said in a deep voice after they arrived at the Damaris residence. Elektra hummed an acknowledgement, passed Lucian her marriage certificate, and watched him stuff it into his pocket. The two then entered the residence. "Mr. Farwell." Ever since what had happened the last time, the butler had been traumatized. He didn't dare to stop Lucian when he saw his arrival. Fortunately for the butler, Lucian halted in his tracks voluntarily and said, "I'm here to see Mr. Damaris. Let him know I'm here. He'll want to see me." Upon hearing that, the butler heaved a sigh of relief inwardly before promptly agreeing. The butler went inside and reported, "Mr. Damaris, Mr. Farwell is here." He brought a woman along. Jack had just returned from the hotel, and he still had rage boiling within him. Before Lucian arrived, Jack had been drinking on his own expressionlessly. When Jack heard the butler, a meaningful look appeared in his eyes. He then ordered the others to keep the alcohol aside before instructing, "Invite them in." The butler agreed and went out to welcome the guests. Not long after, Lucian and Electra appeared before Jack. Jack sized Electra up and smiled. "You have good taste in women, Mr. Farwell. You managed to find yourself such an elegant and cultured lady within a short time. You're indeed incredible, Mr. Farwell." The moment Electra saw Jack, she could feel the dangerous aura Jack was exuding. Slightly terrified, she stood behind Lucian warily. Jack let out a cold snort when he saw how Electra was acting. "Mr. Farwell, have you been secretively hanging out with the candidate's MDM songster lined up for you while Ms. Jarvis was awake? Otherwise, how could you have found someone so quickly? Could it be that this lady here is eager to marry into the Farwell family?" Lucian's expression turned solemn. "You're free to insult me, Mr. Damaris, but don't insult the person next to me." He took a step back and introduced Electra to Jack. "This is Electra Lane, and we grew up together. The Lanes went overseas a few years ago, and Electra followed her family there. She only returned to the country a couple of days ago." "Where is the thing I want?" Lucian's warning had evidently served its purpose. Faced with Electra before him, Jack was now much more disciplined than before. Electra greeted graciously with a smile, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Damaris. I've heard a lot about you." Jack got up and extended his arm courteously for a handshake. "You're so beautiful, Ms. Lane. You sure compliment Mr. Farwell so well. Even your family background is similar to his. You two sure are a match made in heaven. I doubt you'll invite me to your wedding, so I'll give you my blessings first." Then, he shifted his sarcasm-filled eyes to Lucian. "There's a good catch close to you, Mr. Farwell. Why do you have to be so obsessed over Ms. Jarvis? There wouldn't be so many problems if you had chosen Ms. Lane from the beginning." Lucian looked at him coldly. "I've brought her here. Where's the thing I want?" Jack snickered. "Be patient. What I want to see isn't her." An icy glint flashed across the eyes of both men. Lucian pulled out a marriage certificate expressionlessly, and Jack reached out for it. However, Lucian did not seem to have noticed that and instead walked past Jack and put the marriage certificate on the coffee table. "You're right. She's an elegant and cultured lady, so I think you should choose your words wisely, Mr. Damaris." Not only did Lucian introduce Electra to Jack, but Lucian was also warning him. The Farwell family had a good relationship with the Lane family. Having spent a few years overseas, the Lane family had become a force to be reckoned with. Although the Farwell family couldn't do much if Jack were to treat Electra poorly, the Lane family would definitely have a go at Jack. Jack's face darkened drastically as his hand was left empty mid-air. Nonetheless, the instant he caught sight of Electra at the side, he immediately recovered his composure. A hint of contentment crept up his face. It doesn't matter what kind of attitude he gives. He has already lost. Jack broke into a smirk. He turned around and strolled to the coffee table to pick up the marriage certificate. The moment he saw the photo and the official seal on the marriage certificate, he grew even smugger. Tisk! Just look at this well-taken photo. Both Mr. and Mrs. Farwell are very photogenic indeed. Upon saying that, he shook his head regretfully. Then again, this is a marriage certificate. Why aren't the two of you smiling? Those who have no idea what's going on will probably think that someone forced you two into this marriage. The faces of Lucian and Electra clouded over when they heard Jack use Mrs. Farwell in his remarks. Electra turned to Lucian, thinking that he would do something. Unexpectedly, Lucian had already kept his temper in check. His face was devoid of expression as he fixed his eyes on Jack. "Mr. Damaris, isn't the marriage certificate what you want? Nothing else really matters that much, no? No one else, other than the few of us here, will get to see this thing anyway." No matter what kind of blatant provocation Jack made, Lucian was unaffected. Feeling bored, he ultimately returned the marriage certificate to Electra, who received it and kept it away. "You've seen what you wanted, Mr. Damaris. Now then, it's time you give me what I want," Lucian uttered grimly. Jack turned around unhurriedly, opened the drawer, and took out a small glass bottle. It was a transparent bottle, and in it was a colorless and transparent liquid. At one glance, it looked like a serum, the kind women used in their skincare routine. "Here." Jack held the bottle out to Lucian. He was about to flaunt his remarkable medical skills again, but Lucian snatched it away before he could do so. The crease on Lucian's brows deepened as he scrutinized the bottle in his grip seriously. Since he barely had any medical knowledge, there was no way he could tell if the bottle of transparent liquid was the so-called antidote. A real marriage. Looking at Lucian's and Electra's retreating backs, Jack felt another wave of vexation wash over him. He furrowed his brows and muttered to himself, "Childhood sweethearts. The Lane family? Isn't that too much of a coincidence?" Regarding Lucian's love for Roxanne, Jack was not at all doubtful about it. After all, he figured that Lucian would not have agreed to his request if that was not the case. Yet, he thought Electra's sudden appearance at this juncture was too much of a coincidence, so much that he could not help but feel suspicious. After some deliberation, Jack decided to call Kevin over. "Go and find out who exactly Electra Lane is. I must find out the truth so that I can feel assured." That very night, Kevin began his extensive search on Electra. In less than half an hour, he retrieved some results. "Mr. Damaris, I've found it. As Mr. Farwell said, Electra is indeed the daughter of the Lane family. The Lane family and the Farwell family are considered family friends. A few years ago, the Lanes decided to go overseas, and Electra followed along too. However, there aren't any clues as to why she's back recently." Kevin conveyed the investigation findings to Jack respectfully. Despite the lengthy report, Jack did not hear anything related to the marriage. He knitted his brows in dismay. What about the marriage between the Farwell family and the Lane family? It's such a big matter. There's no way the Lanes didn't show any response whatsoever. If I'm right, any family will be eager to announce it to the whole world if their daughter gets to marry Lucian. Since you did as I said, Mr. Farwell, rest assured. I'm a man of my word. That is the antidote for Ms. Jarvis. She'll regain consciousness as long as you feed it to her." A hint of displeasure surged within Jack, but he quickly suppressed his emotions. "Ms. Jarvis is my business partner, after all. There's no reason I'd harm her." Instead of uttering a response, Lucian shot Jack an unfathomable look before he took Electra with him and strode off. How is it possible that there's no news from the Lane family? Jack was particularly suspicious about that. Kevin recalled his investigation findings and said cautiously, "I didn't discover any reaction from the Lanes to the marriage news while I was investigating. It's almost as if they didn't know about the marriage." Jack narrowed his eyes pensively. No reaction? Perhaps they're really clueless about this matter? And one possible reason why they're clueless is that Lucian and Electra haven't had time to inform them. Then again, it's also possible that this marriage is merely a ruse. Kevin was stunned to hear those words. Marriage is such an important matter. How can they not inform their family about it? Jack stayed silent for a long while, seemingly pondering over something. Frustration engulfed him initially, but that soon transformed into contempt and disdain. Get someone to continue keeping an eye on the Lanes. Even though Kevin did not quite understand Jack's meaning, he politely nodded regardless and immediately left to execute the order. With that, Jack was the only one left in the living room. At the thought of Kevin's findings report, Jack curled the corners of his lips into a cold smile. How interesting is it that the Lane family doesn't know about the marriage? Don't tell me the CEO of Farwell Group actually got driven to the edge of the cliff by me and had to fake his marriage? Or did Electra and him agree to a paper marriage? But if that's the case, I wonder what he did to win over the heiress of the Lane family. Her family background is so prominent, so why is she willing to be his nominal wife? Or should I say, is Lucian really that charming? Anyway, none of this matters. Whether or not it's a real marriage, I'll find out sooner or later by monitoring the Lane family's response. If Lucian dares to deceive me regarding this matter. Jack narrowed his eyes dangerously. That bottle he gave Lucian was indeed the antidote that could save Roxanne. Nevertheless, it was impossible to entirely remove the toxins in Roxanne's body based on just that tiny bottle of antidote alone. If we delay any longer after leaving the Damaris residence, Lucian did not even spare time to send Electra home and brought her to the hospital instead. As she sat in the rear passenger seat and observed how worried he looked through the rear-view mirror, she could not help sighing inwardly. So, it turns out that everything Sonia told me previously is true. I can't believe he'd love someone to this extent. Her realization of how strong his love was for Roxanne only piqued her curiosity about what sort of woman Roxanne was. Even though he was taking her to the hospital in the middle of the night, she did not utter a single complaint. It was only after Lucian had sped all the way to the hospital that he realized he had forgotten to send Electra home. Things had been so busy over the past few days that he could hardly think straight. He said apologetically, "I'm sorry for troubling you to come with me to get the marriage certificate at such a late hour, then bringing you here to the hospital. If you don't mind waiting in the car for a while, I'll ask my assistant to come over and take you home." Electra chuckled unconcernedly. Lifting her gaze to look toward the hospital, she replied lightly, "No. I want to go in and see the woman house capable of making you care so deeply about her." Then she turned to Lucian with a smile. "You don't mind, do you?" The pair looked at each other for a few seconds. She could see his gaze gradually soften when she mentioned Roxanne, and her curiosity heightened. "Part of the reason I managed to obtain this bottle of antidote is because of you. In a way, you have a part in saving Roxanne." The amount in that bottle was only 1/5 of the dosage and was enough to keep Roxanne conscious for some time. After the antidote effects wear off, if Lucian keeps his promise and leaves Roxanne, I'll naturally let Roxanne have the remaining dosage. But if he dares to lie to me, I'll make sure he has to beg me for help by then. She should thank you personally, he answered in a deep voice. Upon hearing his response, Elektra could not resist saying teasingly, "Really? Aren't you afraid she'll get jealous when she wakes up and sees you with another woman? No woman can bear such a shock, no." The mere thought of waking up after being unconscious for 3 or 4 days to see the man she loved standing next to a strange woman was too much for Elektra, let alone that it was the reality Roxanne was about to face. Lucian smiled calmly. "Roxanne isn't like that, so you don't have to worry. Since you wish to meet her, you should go in with me." After saying that, he turned and led the way without waiting for her to respond. She was momentarily surprised. Recalling what Lucian had said earlier, she could not suppress her curiosity and hurried after him. As soon as the pair exited the elevator, they saw Madeline quietly wiping her tears next to the door of the ward. She had been tending to Roxanne inside the room and working with the specialists to help Roxanne regain consciousness. But no matter how hard they tried, their efforts had been futile. In fact, Roxanne's condition had even worsened. The sky was pitch black, and it was going to be morning soon. However, they had yet to make any progress. Unable to bear staying in the ward any longer, she had left the room in despair and gone out to the corridor to compose herself. However, try as she might, she could not stop her tears from flowing. When she saw Lucian walking out of the elevator, she was stunned for a few seconds. Then she rushed forward anxiously and grabbed his arm. "How did it go, Mr. Farwell? Have you thought of a way to save Roxanne? There's no time left. If we delay any longer..." No, the only way he can save Roxanne is to comply with Jack's wishes and marry someone else, but I can't worry about that anymore. If we delay any longer, she'll die. When Lucian noticed her red-rimmed eyes, his gaze dimmed with concern. What happened? Did her condition worsen again? He could not think of another reason that could have caused Madeline to cry so bitterly. "Let her take the antidote." Madeline turned to glance in the direction of the ward while struggling to steady her tearful voice. "It was just hardening of the blood vessels at first, but the effect of the treatment these few days has been little to none. Now, several blood spots have appeared." A look of shock and distress filled his eyes when he heard that. He pulled her hand away and strode into the ward. Inside the room, a group of specialists had gathered around Roxanne. They wore expressions of helplessness and pity. "How is she?" Lucian asked coldly. The specialists bowed their heads, not knowing how to respond. They were afraid of incurring Lucian's wrath if they told the truth. Having followed him into the room, Elektra felt a chill run down her spine when she saw the anger on his face. Nonetheless, she calmly reminded him, "Lucian, hurry up and give Ms. Jarvis the antidote." Everyone suddenly took notice of her presence, and their gazes shifted between her and Lucian as they wondered who she was. Madeline followed them into the room. She had noticed the woman while they were standing in the corridor but had been far too worried about Roxanne's condition to ask about her. However, after hearing the woman address Lucian as though they knew each other very well, she could not help feeling sorry for her best friend. Madeline's eyes flashed with hostility as she asked, "Who are you?" Elektra was taken aback. Knowing that Madeline had misunderstood, she smiled and replied, "Let's return to that question later. The most pressing matter now is to let Ms. Jarvis take the antidote." Antidote? Madeline's expression stiffened, then turned into a look of distress. If Caden has obtained the antidote, that means he has married another woman. I guess it must be her. Nonetheless, she knew he had done so to save her best friend's life, so she could not say anything. All she could do was keep the pain she felt to herself. "You should do it." Lucian had walked over without her realizing it and was holding out a clear bottle. Madeline raised her hand and took it from him in a daze, her heart welling up with sadness. "Mr. Farwell, are you trying to avoid arousing suspicion? Otherwise, why would he entrust such an important task to me?" His brows drew together in a slight frown. In a low voice, he replied, "I don't know much about pharmacology. Since you're a doctor, it'd probably be safer if you did it." After saying that, he turned and strode back to the hospital bed. For a moment, Madeline felt at a loss. She turned her head to look at Electra, then glanced at Roxanne on the hospital bed. A trace of hesitation flitted across her eyes. "When Roxanne wakes up and learns of the news, I wonder how she'll take it." However, she only hesitated for a split second before quickly walking forward. "Roxanne is in no condition to wait while I get the details of what happened. We'll deal with it after she takes the antidote. Mr. Farwell, could you please help to lift her?" She stood next to the bed, assuming a professional attitude. Little by little, Madeline poured the antidote into Roxanne's mouth. She had only gotten halfway through when the latter's face suddenly turned pale. Madeline's heart sank, and she quickly stopped feeding her friend the antidote with a conflicted look in her eyes. "She appears as though she's in just as much pain as the other night. The poison is acting up again. What's happening?" Lucian had also noticed the unusual reaction. His panic was almost palpable around him, yet he held Roxanne as gently as ever for fear of accidentally hurting her while she lay unconscious. "A risk I have to take." Madeline's voice trembled a little. "The poison is acting up again, and this time, more violently than before." Lucian tightened his grip when he heard what she said. Why is this happening? He had witnessed it himself when the poison flared up previously. Madeline is now saying that this time is worse than the last. The person in his arms seemed to be in extreme pain. Despite being in his embrace, she was still shivering, her face ghastly white. "Roxanne," Lucian's voice grew strained, and there was a trace of imperceptible panic in his eyes. "I've already brought the antidote over. Why is this still happening? What should we do now? Is the antidote useless?" He lifted his gaze to stare at the group of specialists by the hospital bed. The specialists exchanged glances. After some time, Madeline uttered through gritted teeth, "This is supposed to be the time when the poison flares up, and it's already the third day. Midnight. Jack timed it to the second. If I wait until morning, I'm afraid Roxanne won't be able to hold on anymore." That realization caused a wave of fear to wash over Lucian. A steely look flashed across Madeline's eyes. "We must get Roxanne to consume the antidote as soon as possible. He has no choice except to put up with the pain." She was well aware of the suffering Roxanne was presently experiencing, but there was no other way. "What must I do?" Apart from cooperating, Lucian did not know what else he could do. He could only hate himself for being helpless. Madeline leaned over again and aimed the flask at Roxanne's mouth. "Hold her down. Don't let her struggle," he responded with a grunt. Then, he gazed at the woman in his arms, who was in pain, and held her limbs in place. Meanwhile, Madeline was trying to get Roxanne to drink the antidote. She tried for some time but with no success. Roxanne had gritted her teeth firmly as she struggled with the excruciating pain, and she reflexively resisted everything that tried to enter her mouth with her tongue. As there was so little antidote, Madeline immediately stopped when she saw that her best friend was not cooperating after 2 attempts. "What's the problem?" When Lucian saw her stop what she was doing, yet the antidote in her hand was still unfinished, he grew anxious. Madeline's expression was somber. "Roxanne is rejecting the antidote. I can't get her to take it." Lucian's eyes instantly darkened when he heard that. "Is there no other way to get the antidote's effects?" Madeline shook her head. "The concentration of this antidote is too high to meet the conditions for injection, so it can only be taken orally." After saying that, she anxiously glanced at her best friend. Honestly have no idea how to get Roxanne to take the antidote in this circumstance." Lucian stretched his hand out toward her. "Give it to me." Madeline understood what he meant almost immediately, but she frowned and withdrew her hand to avoid his hand that was about to take the antidote. "We still don't know the composition of Jack's antidote. What if it causes damage to our body if we drink it rashly? Jack used traditional medicine with unidentified compositions. No one can guarantee that he's using one poison to combat another." However, Lucian had already placed Roxanne on the bed and approached Madeline. "It's a risk I have to take. Give it to me," he demanded in a tone that left no room for argument. Madeline's eyes flickered, but she ultimately handed him the antidote after glancing at Roxanne's anguished expression. Everyone witnessed Lucian pouring the remaining antidote into his mouth without hesitation before leaning over and drawing Roxanne into his arms. He forced her to open her mouth by pinching her cheek with his other hand before slowly pressing his lips against hers. "I am just here to help." Only after Roxanne had swallowed the remaining antidote did Lucian finally let go of her. Everyone also heaved a sigh of relief. It was apparent that the antidote had lessened Roxanne's suffering, though her brows remained slightly furrowed. Madeline's tone also softened significantly. "The antidote is taking effect." After saying that, she raised her head and glanced at the specialists on the other side. "Thank you, everyone. You can all go and get some rest. I'll handle it from here." The specialists, who had indeed been working non-stop for several days, excused themselves and turned to leave after hearing what she said. Only Roxanne, Madeline, and Lucian were left in the ward in the end. The situation earlier was so chaotic that Electra stayed at the doorway, not daring to go closer. Now that Roxanne's condition had stabilized and everyone had left, she slowly made her way over to the bed and stopped, curiously staring at the person lying there. The woman on the bed had an exquisite face. Even though she was unconscious and ghastly pale, she gave off a comfortable and pleasant feeling to anyone that looked at her. Even Electra, who was meeting Roxanne for the first time, could not help but feel awful for her after seeing her and remembering what she had been through earlier. She was even more shocked to see Lucian feeding Roxanne the antidote without a care for his safety. I can't believe he can love someone to such an extent. At the same time, she also fully understood why Aubrey had failed after waiting for 6 years. In the face of such love, she has no chance of winning at all. After glancing at Roxanne, who was still unconscious, and then at Lucian, who could not conceal his worry at her side, Electra came to terms with it. Initially, the Lane family was considering a marriage arrangement with the Farwell family. However, she now no longer had such thoughts. All she could do was withdraw into the role of Lucian's close friend and help him when he needed it. The antidote may not kick in so quickly, Madeline explained softly. After saying that, she shifted her gaze to Electra. I didn't have time earlier, so now I'd like to ask, what's going on between you two? Madeline refused to believe that Lucian would marry another woman so easily after seeing everything he had done for her best friend earlier. Moreover, Electra had shown little reaction when Lucian fed the antidote to Roxanne just now. At most, she had only seemed a little shocked. But if they aren't married, how could Jack give them the antidote? Madeline was filled with confusion. Electra met her gaze and explained softly, "Don't worry. I'm not your enemy. I'm just here to help." Her words made Madeline even more confused. As she turned her head to ask Lucian, she suddenly caught sight of the edge of a document peeking out of Electra's bag from the corner of her eye. "What is this?" Her heart constricted as she stared intently at the bag. Electra followed her gaze, and when she spotted the edge of the marriage certificate, an apologetic and regretful look flashed across her eyes. She glanced at Lucian to seek his opinion. Only after getting a nod from him did she take out the marriage certificate. "This is a marriage certificate?" Madeline interrupted her in disbelief. She stared at the person before her and then at Lucian. "You two did get married?" No wonder Jack handed the antidote over. "Is this antidote real? That's not it. You've misunderstood," Electra hurriedly said. Madeline smiled wryly at her. "Jack would never hand over the antidote if you didn't do it. It's fine. I won't blame you. It's the only way to save Roxanne. I merely feel sorry for her. My best friend was first poisoned and subjected to physical agony, but when she wakes up, she has to face the pain of losing her lover." When Electra noticed how unhappy the doctor was, she anxiously wanted to explain but was unsure whether she could, so she could only look at Lucian to seek his opinion. Directly taking over the conversation, Lucian stated in a low voice, "This is merely a trick we pulled on Jack. It's all fake. This is Electra Lane, a childhood friend of mine. She went abroad with her family to build their business for a few years and just returned to the country 2 days ago. I merely asked her to assist me in playing a part." Electra nodded in agreement. However, Madeline had a hard time processing what he said. "What do you mean? Fake? But isn't this a marriage certificate? How can it be fake when even the marriage certificate is completed?" Electra could not help but chuckle. "This isn't a legitimate document." After saying that, she tore up the marriage certificate right in front of Madeline. Madeline was stunned by what she did, but as she watched the marriage certificate being ripped to shreds, she slowly started to believe it. She cast her a grateful look. "Thank you. If it wasn't for you, Roxanne might have, it's not a big deal. It's just a fake marriage, and I have nothing to lose. All is good as long as she can wake up, Electra replied with a grin. After learning that the two had a fake marriage, Madeline felt more at ease. All that remained was worrying about when Roxanne would wake up. Time ticked by. The three of them grew increasingly worried when they realized that more than 2 hours had passed. Why is she still unconscious? Lucian could not help but turn and question Madeline. After all, she had the most experience as the sole doctor in the room. Madeline also looked slightly confounded, and when she spoke, she sounded a little hesitant. I don't know either. A swell of anger and uneasiness gradually rose within Lucian. Is this antidote real? How can you be sure? If that despicable Jack wants to see me in a wretched state and gave me a fake antidote. He was livid when he thought of that possibility. He wanted nothing more than to drag Jack before of him immediately and get clear answers. Seeing his irate expression, Madeline frowned and replied, I don't think it's fake. As you witnessed just now, Roxanne's symptoms did subside after she consumed the antidote. It probably only takes some time for the antidote to take full effect. Let's wait a little longer. Electra also chimed in, judging by Jack's expression as he retrieved the antidote just now, it doesn't seem to be a fake. Especially the intense response he gave when Lucian questioned him. Despite not knowing whatever happened between them, Electra understood that if Jack truly needed Roxanne in the future, he probably would not harm her. Lucian could only suppress his inner rage after hearing their words. Zane brought food to the three of them right on time. However, they were not in the mood to eat and continued to wait anxiously. Electra could not help but feel a little strange as she stared at the person lying on the hospital bed. It was her first time meeting Roxanne, who was still unconscious and had never said a word to her. Yet, she somehow felt the same way as Madeline, as if the person lying on the hospital bed was her friend. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.